My dad gave the company to my golden child brother. Now they're losing clients and calling me daily. Hi, I'm Charles Miller, 27, and last month my dad told me I was just labor, while handing the family company to my golden boy brother. So I quit. Quietly. 2 weeks later, their biggest client offered me a director position. Last I checked, my family's business is bleeding, and now they're begging me to come back. Here's how that went down. I'd been working at my dad's industrial repair company since I was 16. Not because I had to, because I was good at it. Hands-on field tech work. The kind where a wrong alignment can melt down a machine worth 6 figures. I liked it. I was good at it. And I kept our clients' production floors from turning into scrapyards. But my brother Marcus? He got the glory. He was the one with the business degree. The one who wore button-downs and stood in air-conditioned offices pretending Excel sheets made him irreplaceable. He couldn't tell a torque wrench from a toothbrush, but that didn't matter to my dad. Marcus was leadership. I was boots on the ground, which was apparently a nice way of saying someone expendable. The last straw? A Monday morning meeting. I'd just come off a 14-hour emergency repair shift keeping our biggest client, Allendale Steel, running through a production crisis. I hadn't even had coffee yet. My dad calls me into the office. Sits me down like he's about to offer me a bonus or at least a decent thank you. Instead, he says, "Charles, I'm stepping back next quarter. Marcus is taking over full operations. We need you focused on the field." No conversation. No warning. Just a demotion masked as delegation. I blinked. "Wait, you're handing him the business?" "He has the vision," Dad said. "And the education. You're a solid worker, son." But not everyone's meant to lead. That was the moment. Not the words. The way he said them. Like he was giving me a compliment. Like telling me I was just labor was supposed to make me proud. I didn't argue. I didn't slam the desk or storm out. I just nodded. Got it. 2 days later, I handed in my notice. Simple, clean, no drama. My dad barely looked up from his inbox. "You sure?" he said, like I was quitting a gym membership. "You've got stability here." I told him. "I've got skills. I'll be fine." He smirked. "Field techs like you aren't exactly in high demand." "Yeah. We'll see about that." Turns out, field techs like me were exactly what companies were scrambling to find, especially ones who actually knew what the hell they were doing. I didn't even make it through my 2 weeks before I got a call from Allendale Steel's site manager, Fiona Tate. Now, Fiona wasn't the warm, fuzzy type. Think buzzcut, steel-toe boots, and a permanent squint like she's trying to find which idiot is wasting her time. But she respected results. And I'd been quietly delivering them for years. "Got a minute?" she said. "Depends. You trying to sell me scrap metal insurance or what?" She snorted. "We're building out an internal ops team. We need someone who understands our equipment like it's family. Someone who's not afraid to tell us when our engineers are overthinking themselves into a shutdown." "And you want me?" "I want someone who doesn't treat a vibrating mount like an acceptable Tuesday," she said. "And yeah, that's you?" I waited. "What's the role?" "Field Operations Director. Full authority on workflow, maintenance planning, on-site logistics. 2 people under you. Salary's real. Benefits too. You'd report to me, not to some clipboard in khakis." I didn't say yes right away, but she knew it was coming. Before I hung up, she added, "Also, just FYI, we're dropping Pierce Industrial from our preferred vendor list. Can't have a firm leading our support who doesn't know which end of a socket set to hold." I felt my eyebrows go up. "That official?" "Paperwork's and legal," she said. "But yeah, tell your brother congratulations. He's about to lose his biggest account." I hung up and just sat there in my apartment, staring at the wall. There it was. My entire family's hierarchy had just imploded. And the best part? I hadn't even done anything but exist in my actual value for 5 minutes. 3 days later, the news hit my old shop. My phone buzzed like it owed rent. First my mom. Then my uncle. Then a frantic message from Marcus. "Hey man, can you give me a call when you get a sec? Just want to talk through some changes." Changes. Right. Then came the email. Subject line, possible collaboration opportunity. From my dad. The man who told me I was just labor now wanted to know if I had time for a quick meeting. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry. Because I was finally busy being seen somewhere else. 3 days after I started my new role at Allendale, Marcus showed up uninvited. I was in the middle of leading a site walkthrough with 2 junior techs, explaining why the new compressor alignment spec was wrong on paper but right in practice, when I heard someone clear their throat behind me like they were announcing royalty. I turned. There he was. My brother. Hair gelled, button-down shirt with no dirt on it, holding a folder like he thought it was a shield. And looking like he just realized he was the only person on site without a hard hat or a clue. "Charlie," he said, with this strange smile like we were at Thanksgiving. "Got a sec?" I turned back to my guys. "Take 5. I said. "Hydrate. Don't touch that blue valve, ask me why later." They nodded and wandered off. I faced Marcus. "You drove 2 hours for a chat?" He smiled tighter. "Thought it'd be better in person. This account was important to us." "Was?" I said. Past tense. He looked around, taking in the facility like he was trying to memorize it. "We got the termination letter this morning. Dad's freaking out. He wants to talk to you." "Why?" "Because," he laughed, a little too hard. "Because this is a misunderstanding. We can fix it." That's when I realized they thought this was temporary. Like losing a client was a bump, not a break. Like I'd been waiting by the door with a puppy face and a resume. I crossed my arms. "You still think I'm coming back, don't you?" He held up the folder. "We drew up a counteroffer. A director title. Stake options. We're even open to revisiting the partnership model. Dad's willing to rework the org chart. A year ago, I might have stared at that folder like it was a golden ticket. Now, it looked like a desperate PDF trying to glue a crumbling wall. I didn't take it. I just said, 'You didn't want me until someone else did.' That's not true. You removed me from every key site after I gave notice. Gave me trash jobs. Told the crew I wasn't essential." He froze. "You heard that?" I nodded. "Yeah. I heard it. Every word." Marcus exhaled, suddenly looking older. Or smaller. "Look. Dad was wrong. About how he handled things. So was I. You've always been the guy who kept things running. And now we're seeing that." "No," I said. "Now you're feeling it. That's different." He looked down. Said nothing. Behind us, Fiona walked by, nodded at me, and said, "We're rolling out Phase 2 next week. Let's sync tomorrow?" "Absolutely," I said. Marcus caught that. His eyes flicked to her, then back to me. And that's when it hit him. He didn't have pull here. Not with me. Not with them. Not anymore. He held out the folder again. "Just think about it, okay?" I looked him in the eye. "I already did." He lowered his hand. And for the first time in my life, I watched my brother realize he wasn't the one in control. I got home that night to a message from my dad. No subject line. Just 3 sentences. "We're hemorrhaging work since you left. Can we meet? I'll bring your mother if it helps. This isn't about ego, it's about survival." Which was rich, considering 3 weeks ago, I was just labor. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I opened a beer, sat on the balcony of my apartment, which, by the way, didn't smell like brake fluid for once, and watched traffic move like it wasn't my job to fix everything anymore. The next morning, I walked into Allendale's main office and Fiona waved me into the conference room before I could even clock in. Victor, the VP of Operations, was already inside. Clean cut, direct, and about as easy to impress as a brick wall. He nodded at me. "Shut the door." I did. Then he looked up and said, "We want to bring all field maintenance fully in-house. You'd run it." My brain didn't fully register what he meant at first. "I thought this was just for one site," I said. "It was," Fiona added. "Then we realized how many hours we've wasted dealing with contractors who can't read a wiring schematic." Victor pushed a folder across the table. "This would be your department. Your hires. Your call. Name your budget." I blinked. "You want me to build a team from scratch?" "We want you to run the show," he said. "Not fix a broken system. Replace it." I opened the folder. Salary was more than double what I made at my dad's shop. Title: Director of Internal Field Ops. And below that? A budget line for equipment, training, and 2 senior-level hires of my choosing. I stared at the numbers. At the trust. Why me? I asked, still half expecting a catch. Fiona leaned back. Because when you're on site, things work. And because I've watched guys like you get dismissed for years by people who think clean fingernails equal competence. Victor added. Your old company thought they owned you loyalty. We're offering something better. Authority. I closed the folder slowly. Can I think about it? Victor gave a rare smile. Sure. But if you wait too long, we might hire you a personal assistant too. I laughed. For the first time in weeks, it wasn't bitter. That afternoon, I texted my dad. I'm not coming back. Got a better offer. I hope the business finds its footing, but I won't be part of it. He didn't reply. But 2 hours later, Marcus tried calling me 6 times. Some things take longer to sink in when you're used to believing the world revolves around you. By the time the official paperwork hit my inbox, word had gotten out. Not publicly, not with headlines or press releases, but in a small, weirdly interconnected universe of industrial contractors and plant managers, news travels faster than a dropped wrench in an empty factory. Within days, I got 3 emails from former clients of my dad's business. All different versions of the same thing. Heard you're running things at Allendale now. Got a minute to talk shop? I forwarded one to Fiona, who just replied, Good. Let them come. Meanwhile, at Pierce Industrial, things were not great. Tessa, my cousin, and one of the few people at that company I actually liked, sent me a message late one night. They're panicking. Marcus tried to pick up your old route and almost caused a shutdown. He gave the wrong calibration numbers to a new tech, and the client caught it before anyone turned the machine on. Barely. She added, Dad's been on calls all week trying to keep smaller accounts from jumping ship. Mom says your parents aren't sleeping. I wish I could say it felt like revenge. It didn't. It felt like validation. One morning, about 2 weeks into the new role, I was walking the floor when Fiona stopped me mid-step. Just got off the phone with someone from Borson Manufacturing, she said. They're asking if your old shop is still your vendor. I shrugged. I told them I wasn't sure. But I offered to help them transition. She grinned. You're a polite little wrecking ball, you know that? That afternoon, I got an email from my dad. Charles. This is getting out of hand. We're losing everything you built. Can we talk? I almost deleted it. But then, I thought about what he said, everything you built. That was the first time he'd ever phrased it that way. So I replied, Sure. I'll come by tomorrow. One condition, you bring Marcus, and neither of you try to sell me on a family fix. I'll listen. But I'm not pretending anymore. His reply came in under 3 minutes. Agreed. I didn't expect what I saw when I walked into the shop the next day. The lights were still on. The same old coffee machine was still making the worst coffee known to man. But the place felt hollow. Like a skeleton of what it used to be. Marcus was already waiting. He looked tired. That glossy, fake it till you make it polish was gone. He actually had grease on his sleeve. Which either meant he tried working on something, or hugged someone who had. My dad came in last. He looked like he'd aged a decade since I left. He sat down across from me and said, We made a mistake. That was it. No speech. No build-up. Just those 4 words. We made a mistake. That sentence sat in the air like a tool left on the edge of a workbench, dangerous if it slips, maybe useful if you grab it the right way. I didn't reply. Dad rubbed his jaw the way he does when he's nervous but trying not to show it. Marcus just stared down at a clipboard like it held the secrets of the universe. Finally, Dad continued. We underestimated you. For a long time. And now we're paying for it. Still no apology. Just consequences. He looked over at Marcus, who didn't lift his head. Your brother's been trying to pick up where you left off. It's not going well. Oh? I said, voice flat. You mean he can't run field ops with a podcast and a spreadsheet? Marcus flinched. That one hit. I know you're angry, Dad said. No. I corrected him. I was angry a month ago. Now I'm just doing better. Silence. Then Marcus finally looked up. We can't run the business without you. And there it was. Honesty. Not flattery. Not spin. Just the truth. I'm not surprised, I said. Because I was the business, at least the part that kept the clients from walking. Dad leaned forward, hands clasped. So, here's what we're asking. Come back. Not as labor. As a partner. Equal ownership with Marcus. We'll put it in writing. You'd lead field ops. Full authority. We want to rebuild, but we can't do it without the guy who actually knew what he was doing. That part stung more than it should have. Because if they'd said this before I walked, maybe it would have mattered. But now, I had a budget, a team, an office with working air conditioning, and a VP who didn't look at me like I was a glorified wrench monkey. I let the silence stretch until Marcus finally added, "I'll step back if I have to." You were right. I wasn't ready. I don't think I ever was. And for a split second, I almost wavered. Almost. But then I remembered the smirks. The reassignments. The meetings where I wasn't invited to speak. The years of being told I was essential only when something broke. So I said, "I appreciate the offer. But I've already accepted another." Dad blinked. "You're serious?" "As a heart attack," I said. "And trust me, my current employer actually lets me sit at the adult table." Marcus slumped back in his chair. Dad stared at me like he was trying to solve a puzzle that had already left the box. "I wish things were different," he muttered. "No," I replied. "You wish I hadn't changed. That's not the same thing." Then I stood up, grabbed my coat, and said, "Good luck. You're gonna need it." I walked out the front door. This time, I didn't look back. The next week, they started bleeding clients fast. Tessa sent another message, this one sounding almost panicked. 3 accounts gone in 5 days. Marcus is trying to call in favors, but no one's biting. They're saying the shop doesn't feel reliable anymore. Gee, I wonder why. Meanwhile, at Allendale? We were just getting warmed up. I brought on my first 2 hires, Ray, a veteran tech with more intuition in his pinky than most crews have combined, and Elias, a former systems analyst who actually liked crawling around in tight corners to diagnose wiring problems. I trained them like I wish someone had trained me. Clear, direct, no ego, no politics. Just what worked. They caught on fast. By week 3, we'd already cut downtime on our most temperamental production line by 42%. Fiona walked in on a Tuesday holding a clipboard and a coffee and said, "Remind me again why I didn't hire you 2 years ago." "Because you thought I came with the Pierce package," I said. She smirked. "Worst packaging ever. Like ordering a laptop and getting a shoebox full of ego and clip art." Victor overheard and actually laughed. "And when the VP of Operations laughs? You know you're winning." Then came the kicker. One of our legacy clients, McNaughton Refinery, reached out and asked if I'd be willing to consult for them directly. They'd worked with Pierce for over a decade, but once they found out I jumped ship, they didn't even blink. "We want you," the manager said bluntly. "Not your brother. Not a subcontractor. We want the guy who knew the pressure readouts by heart." It was surreal. All those years being treated like I was just muscle and a name tag, and now I was turning down contracts because I didn't have time to help everyone. Even Fiona noticed. She pulled me aside one morning and said, "You're not just stabilizing this place. You're making it better." "I'm trying," I said. "No," she corrected me. "You are. And they're watching." She meant Pierce Industrial. I didn't ask how she knew. Didn't have to. Word gets around when the guy you dismissed as just labor becomes the reason your phone won't stop ringing with bad news. I hadn't spoken to my parents since the day I turned down their offer. But one night, I got a call from an unknown number. Voicemail. Dad's voice. "Charles. Look. I know you said no. But things have gotten worse. We're losing people. Marcus is trying, but it's not enough. I'm asking. As your father, not as your former boss. Please. Come back." I didn't call him back. Not because I didn't hear the desperation, but because I'd already heard everything I needed to. 2 days after that voicemail, my mom showed up at my apartment. Unannounced. I opened the door half expecting to find a neighbor with a package. Instead, there she was, standing in the hallway holding a Tupperware container like it was a peace offering and not a Trojan horse. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, voice brittle. I stared at her. "Didn't know you had my address. Your cousin?" She thought maybe if I came in person. I didn't move to let her in. Just leaned against the doorframe. She held the container out. "I made your favorite. Chicken tetrazzini. With the mushrooms you like, not the canned ones." I didn't take it. "Why are you really here?" Her eyes welled up. "Because your father won't admit it, but he's scared. The company's falling apart. Marcus is in over his head. She swallowed. I didn't know it would fall apart so fast. We thought we had time. You didn't, I said calmly. You had me. Her lips trembled. Charles, I didn't know it was this bad. No, I said. You didn't want to know. You wanted to believe Marcus had it under control so you wouldn't have to admit who really ran that shop. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The silence filled in the confession she couldn't say out loud. I let it sit for a second, then asked, Why now? Why this? Because it's your father's birthday next week, she said, tears finally slipping down. And he hasn't touched his tools in a month. He just sits. He's not the same. I exhaled. Deep. Controlled. I'm sorry he's struggling, I said. But I'm not a wrench you only pick up when the engine seizes. I built my own shop now. My own team. I'm not coming back. Her eyes fell. But it's family. No, I corrected. It's blood. Family would have never made me beg to be seen. She didn't argue. Just stood there holding a container of pasta no one was going to eat. Before she turned to leave, she whispered, I hope one day you'll forgive us. I already did, I said. But forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. And it sure as hell isn't the same as returning. She nodded, slowly. Walked away. I closed the door and didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. Because for the first time in my life, I hadn't been pulled back into fixing someone else's mess just to feel worthy. 3 months after I left Pierce Industrial, Allendale gave me something I hadn't felt in years, a Monday that didn't feel like a punishment. Ray and Elias were humming along, figuratively and literally, since Ray liked to belt old country songs while checking voltages. We'd streamlined 3 workflows, cut emergency calls by over 60%, and the production team actually smiled when we walked in the room. I mean, that alone was worth a raise. Fiona called me into her office. Victor was already there, flipping through a report with his usual expressionless laser vision. Close the door, Fiona said. I did. Victor set the report down. We want to expand the department. I blinked. Already? You've reduced downtime to the point where finance asked if you were hiding costs, he said. Turns out, you're just good at your job. They weren't offering a promotion. They were building around me. New facilities. More hires. More budget. A permanent seat at the table where decisions were made. And just when I thought things couldn't get better, an email pinged. Subject line, Pierce Industrial, Client Loss Report. It had been forwarded by a contact from McNaughton. Attached was a list. 10 clients. Gone. Most of them had been mine, before Marcus rearranged the schedule to sideline me. Below the list was a note. Figured you'd want to know. They're shopping for buyers. Whole operation might go under. I sat with that for a moment. Not because I felt guilty, but because it was so predictable it almost hurt. They'd built a company on my back, and then been shocked when it collapsed without me holding it up. Later that week, I got another message. This time from a number I recognized but hadn't saved. Marcus. The text was short. He's selling. Wants to talk. Please. I didn't answer. Instead, I went for a walk. A long one. Past the old industrial parks, past the places I used to pull 14-hour shifts in steel-toe boots just to be called the muscle. Past the coffee shop where I used to write up repair plans because no one else bothered to make documentation. And then I walked into the building I helped reshape. The one where my name was on the department door. I stood there for a second, hand on the knob, and realized something I never thought I'd feel. Gratitude. Not for them. For me. For finally saying no. For walking away before I got buried in their expectations. For building something that worked because I stopped waiting for permission. 2 weeks after Marcus texted me, I ran into him at a supply expo downtown. He was standing near a booth for some outdated diagnostic software, tie loosened, hair messier than I'd ever seen it. For a second, he didn't notice me. He was talking to a rep, nodding way too hard, like he was trying to convince them, or himself, that he was still in control of something. When our eyes met, he froze. I gave him a simple nod. He walked over, shoulders hunched like a guy who knew how far he'd fallen but still hoped there was a ladder nearby. Charles, he said. Didn't expect to see you here. Why not? I asked. I actually work in this field. He flinched, but he didn't deny it. We stood in awkward silence for a moment. Then he said, Dad's meeting with a broker next week. Trying to sell the company before the accounts dry up. I nodded. Makes sense. He's not taking it well, Marcus added. He won't say it, but I think it's hitting him that the business was never really about the spreadsheets. No, I said. It was about the hands that kept the machines running. The clients didn't stay for the logo. They stayed because someone showed up when it mattered. He looked at me then, really looked, like he finally saw the full picture. I was wrong, he said quietly. About a lot of things. I didn't let him off the hook, but I didn't twist the knife either. Yeah, I said. You were. Another pause. Then he asked, You ever think about buying it? That caught me off guard. Buying what? The company, he said. Dad's talking to strangers. But if you wanted it, hell, if you took it, you could bring it back. I stared at him. Was he serious? You're asking me to buy the business that kicked me out of every decision, gave me busy work in my final weeks, and let you call me just labor behind my back? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. I shook my head. Marcus, I've already built something better. Why would I go backward? He looked down, exhaled. Because maybe it deserves to be in the right hands this time. I let that sit. Then I said, Maybe it does. But that doesn't mean those hands have to be mine. He nodded once. Like he finally understood. I left him there, standing alone in a sea of lanyards and sales pitches. And as I stepped back into the expo hallway, I felt it settle in my chest. Closure. Not with a bang. Not with a takeover. Just with truth. The following week, I got a call from the broker handling the Pierce Industrial sale. Hi, Mr. Miller, she said, crisp and corporate. I understand you're the former operations lead? Former is right, I said, already knowing where this was going. She continued anyway. We've been approached by multiple buyers with questions about your role. There's some interest in continuity, especially with clients familiar with your work. Some are even asking if you'd be willing to consult during the transition. I laughed. Not harsh, just honest. Let me guess, I said. They're worried the brand isn't worth much without the guy who kept the place from collapsing? Silence on the other end. Then, well, yes. There it was. It was strange. To be needed now. Not in some vague, emotional guilt trip kind of way, but in a tangible, ledger line, make or break kind of way. I told her I'd think about it. Because technically I hadn't ruled out consulting. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to wear someone else's name on my work again. That same day, Fiona called me into her office. Close the door, she said. Always a sign. Victor was sitting there too, which meant this wasn't about budgets or site issues. Fiona got right to it. We want to give you a new title. Let me guess, I said. Chief of knowing when things are about to break? Victor cracked a grin. Close. Fiona slid a document across the table. Vice President of Field Operations. It wasn't just a raise. It was equity. Decision-making authority. A permanent seat at the leadership table. My own budget line in the quarterly reports. My own department. My own legacy. You've built something real here, Fiona said. We're not just rewarding that, we're betting on it. I looked down at the offer. Then looked up at them. You know I didn't go to business school, right? Victor shrugged. Good. Means we won't have to retrain you out of it. We all laughed. And just like that I said yes. Not because I needed the promotion. But because it was the first time someone handed me power after seeing what I could do, not instead of it. Later that night, I found myself alone in my office, looking out over the lot, lights glowing under a sky that used to feel a lot heavier. I wasn't chasing anyone's approval anymore. I wasn't waiting for my name to be called. It already was. 2 days into my new VP role, I walked into a leadership meeting and saw something that made me pause. On the whiteboard at the front of the room, among project timelines and vendor notes, was a bullet point labeled Miller Ops Model, Template? I blinked. What's that? Fiona, already scribbling on a legal pad, answered without looking up. Your rollout process. Your reporting style. Your field protocols. We want to mirror them across our other locations. Victor says it cut costs without cutting quality. That's a unicorn. I just stood there, caught off guard by the idea that my system, something I'd built half out of muscle memory and half out of sheer necessity, was now the standard. They weren't just respecting me. They were replicating me. The meeting started. I sat quietly for a minute, thinking about the first time I ever held a wrench at the Pierce shop. I must have been 13. I remember my dad looking over my shoulder and saying, "Don't drop it. That tool costs more than you do." It was a joke. Probably. But I'd spent years chasing the idea that he meant it. That I was replaceable. Just labor. Just hands. And now? There was a column on a whiteboard with my name on it. Not as a warning. As a model. That night, I got dinner with Ray and Elias. We hit the same dive bar we'd gone to after our first big fix. Greasy wings, terrible lighting, perfect. Ray raised a beer. To the guy who built a whole system just so no one ever had to feel like a ghost in their own shop. Elias added. And to the boss who lets us argue without pulling rank. I smiled. You're not employees. You're engineers. People don't grow if you treat them like socket extensions. Ray grinned. And you didn't even go to management school? Nope, I said. But I've had a PhD in being ignored. I think it worked out. Halfway through dinner, I got a text from Tessa. It's official. Sale closed. Pierce Industrial is now part of a conglomerate out of Indiana. They're stripping the name. Rehiring selectively. I stared at that line for a long time. Stripping the name. That legacy I wasn't good enough to lead? It didn't even survive one fiscal quarter without me. I didn't feel smug. I felt clean. The end of a chapter 1 didn't have to rewrite. A few weeks after the Pierce Industrial sale, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside, a check for $1,750, marked Final Equipment Reimbursement, and a note in my dad's handwriting. Charles, figured this belonged to you. Some of your tools were still on site when the sale closed. Didn't want the new owners to claim what wasn't theirs. H. No. Love, Dad. No call. Just clean bookkeeping and an unspoken acknowledgement. And that, right there, was probably the closest thing to closure I was ever going to get from him. I folded the note, didn't tear it up, didn't throw it away. I just slipped it in the back of a drawer labeled Miscellaneous, Receipts. Felt fitting. Later that day, I walked into a strategy session at Allendale, where Victor laid out expansion plans. We were opening a second site across the state line. New location. New team. Same operational model, mine. Victor turned to me halfway through the meeting. You want it? I blinked. Want what? Lead on the new build, he said. It's yours if you say yes. Title stays the same. But it'd make you the point of contact for a site that could double our production in a year. It wasn't a promotion. It was scale. I thought about it for maybe half a second. Let's do it, I said. The room didn't erupt in applause. It wasn't that kind of culture. But Victor nodded, Fiona smiled, and the new project manager, some expoing wizard with an engineering brain and zero social filters, turned to me and said, Cool. Just tell me what you need and where not to screw up. Progress. After the meeting, I walked the floor alone. Just did a slow loop of the main bay where I'd spent the last 6 months turning chaos into coordination. There was a kid, new tech, maybe 22, kneeling beside a cooling line, checking a junction with the exact look I used to have. The one that says, I know this is broken, I just don't know why yet, but I'm not walking away. I crouched beside him. What do you see? I asked. He jumped a little, then shrugged. There's a flicker in the pressure sensor, but I can't tell if it's the gauge or the feed line. I nodded. Check the flex point first. 9 times out of 10, it's the bracket that's the problem. But don't skip the calibration. Sensors lie. The numbers never do. He stared at me like I just handed him a cheat code. Thanks, sir. I grinned. Don't call me sir. I just got here first. We stood up. I walked away without saying anything else, but inside, I was grinning like a guy who'd just seen proof that legacy doesn't need to come from last names. It can come from impact. A month into the new site build, I drove past the old Pierce Industrial building. It was subtle at first. The sign was gone, replaced with a generic logo that looked like it was ordered off a stock template site. The lot was only half full. The windows darker. The hum gone. The place looked hollow. I parked across the street, engine running, just watching for a minute. Like I expected something familiar to peek out and wave. It didn't. Of course it didn't. Then a guy I didn't recognize stepped out the front door. Clipboard in hand, headset on. He glanced around, punched a code into the new keypad, then disappeared back inside. That building had been my life for nearly a decade. I'd scraped my knuckles bloody in that bay. Bled for that name. And now? I couldn't even get in the door without a visitor's badge. That should have hurt. But it didn't. It felt like walking by an apartment you used to rent, the kind with a broken shower and walls that were definitely not soundproof, and realizing you don't miss it. You just remember how small it was. I drove off without stopping. That night, I went home to a kitchen that wasn't covered in bolt grease, to a fridge that didn't smell like leftover job site sandwiches. I pulled out a beer, kicked my boots off, and checked my email. One new message. From the guy who'd bought the Pierce operation. Subject line. We inherited a few client contracts with your name all over them. You open to freelance consultation? I didn't even open the body of the message. Just sat back and laughed. Because it was poetic, really. The name they tossed aside had outlived the brand they tried to protect. I wrote back, short and professional. Thanks for reaching out. I'm currently under contract with Allendale as VP of Field Ops. Can't consult on any projects tied to my old work, per our internal policy. Charles Miller. Send. No bitterness. No flex. Just a boundary. A firm one. And it felt damn good. It was a Tuesday morning when I walked into the Allendale site and found something unexpected on my desk. Not a report. Not a parts invoice. A package. Small, square, and wrapped like someone had watched one YouTube tutorial on how to do corners but got impatient halfway through. No name on the outside. Inside? A coffee mug. White ceramic. Black letters. Just labor. I stared at it for a long minute. There was no card, no sender info, no wink-wink emoji note. But I knew exactly who it was from. Marcus. I didn't need handwriting to confirm it. The mug itself said everything, half joke, half olive branch. And weirdly, it didn't piss me off. It almost made me laugh. Because here I was, VP of Field Ops, department budget in the 7 figures, team expanding into multiple states, and my brother, the guy who once called me replaceable behind a closed door, was sending me a mug like he finally got the joke he'd been the butt of for years. I set it on the shelf behind my desk. Not front and center, but visible. Later that day, Ray walked in, took one look at it, and barked a laugh. Who gave you that? Legacy merch, I said dryly. He squinted. You keeping it? I nodded. It reminds me. Of what? That sometimes people don't see your value until they have to rebuild everything without you. He let out a low whistle. You're a cold son of a bitch. Not cold, I said. Just finally at room temperature. That afternoon, I got pulled into a budget review with Fiona and the CFO. The numbers were good, better than good. Our downtime improvements had saved more money in 6 months than the last 3 contractor cycles combined. The CFO leaned back in his chair and said, We'd like you to speak at the investor update next quarter. I blinked. Me? Fiona nodded. You're the case study. They want to see what smart operational investment actually looks like. I sat with that for a second. Investor update. The room I used to be locked out of. Now they wanted me to walk in and explain how I turned a handful of tools and a decent crew into a system worth replicating. I didn't need a plaque. Or a family name. Or some shallow crown they'd already melted down and sold off. I just needed this. A team that respected the work. A desk with my name on it. And a stupid coffee mug that reminded me where I came from, and how far I wasn't going back. The day before the investor presentation, I got a voicemail from my dad. I almost didn't listen to it. But curiosity is a stubborn muscle. His voice came through quieter than usual, like he was recording it from his car, windows up, something heavy sitting on his chest. Hey Charles. I heard about the news site. Your cousin Tessa showed me the article. I saw your name next to VP and expansion lead. Guess I always figured that title would happen here. I was wrong. You earn more than I ever gave you credit for. That mug Marcus sent, it was his idea, not mine. I wouldn't have thought of it. I'm still learning how to be a better version of a guy who was too proud to say he messed up. Long pause. Then, anyway, I hope you're happy. You deserve to be. No ask. No come visit. No guilt trip. Just a slow, fragile attempt at being a real person. And that? That meant more than any partnership offer ever could have. That night, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror rehearsing my investor update lines. I'd built systems, not speeches. This wasn't my natural zone. But as I looked at my reflection, button-down shirt, clean-shaved, tired eyes but steady, I saw someone I recognized. Not the kid covered in grease who begged to be seen. Not the guy who stayed silent to keep the family peace. Me. Charles Miller. 27, Vice President. Builder of teams. Teacher of hands-on leadership. And the last person anyone expected to be the blueprint for modern field ops. At the meeting the next day, I walked into the presentation room early. Fiona gave me a nod. Victor didn't say anything, he just slid a chair back at the head of the table and kept talking to finance. No fuss. No pageantry. Just a seat. And this time? It was mine before I had to prove anything. 3 days after the investor presentation, which, for the record, went better than any of us expected, I got an email from one of the new board members. Short. To the point. Charles, clear, strategic, grounded. You're exactly what this company needs more of. I hope you know that. And yeah, that one I saved. Pinned it, actually. Right above my monitor next to a sticky note that just says, Fieldwork first. Ego second. That same afternoon, I got lunch with Elias and Ray out at the new build site. We were sitting on the back of a flatbed trailer, eating gas station sandwiches because tradition is tradition. Elias looked around at the framework going up, then back at me. You ever think about what this would have looked like if you'd stayed at Pierce? Ray snorted. Probably the same building, but half-built and somehow on fire. I laughed, but Elias kept his eyes on me. Waiting. And yeah, I had thought about it. A lot. So I said it out loud. If I'd stayed, I'd still be chasing permission to speak. Ray raised his sandwich. To silence. I raised mine. To freedom. We clinked like idiots and kept eating. Later that day, I walked the perimeter of the new site, clipboard in hand, but my brain somewhere else. I remembered something my dad used to say whenever a machine was acting up. Everything works until it doesn't. And damn if that wasn't a metaphor for my entire family dynamic. Everything worked. Until I stopped pretending it did. Until I stopped being just labor. Until I stopped fixing things for people who wouldn't even hand me the right wrench. Now, things actually work. Not because I kept patching the cracks. But because I walked away and built new walls. Stronger. Straighter. Mine. 1 year to the day after I left Pierce Industrial, I stood alone in the new facility's main bay, the lights humming above rows of flawless, humming equipment. My name wasn't on a building. It didn't need to be. It was in every process we ran, every system we refined, every crew member who walked in knowing their job mattered. That morning, a small package had arrived at my desk. Inside was a photo. Me, age 19, crouched beside my dad under a broken lift. We were both covered in oil. I'd forgotten the moment completely. On the back, in his handwriting. Didn't say it then. Saying it now. You made this place run. Proud of you. Dad. No speech. No catch. Just the one sentence I'd waited half my life to hear, sent from a man who'd finally stopped mistaking silence for strength. I slid the photo into my drawer, right next to the just labor mug. Kept both. Not as trophies. As proof. That when you stop asking for permission to matter, when you stop playing roles built by fear and tradition, you don't lose family. You find yourself. And if they want to meet you there? Good. But if not? You'll be just fine. Because you already built the thing they said you never could. A life on your own terms.